This video is an extract from our deeper look of Surah Al-Ahzab, which is currently taking place live in Chicago right now during our 4-week intensive summer Quran seminary. But for the first time ever, we're also streaming the entire thing live exclusively within the Bayyinah TV app itself. It will not be here on YouTube or social media. So, register now on BayyinahTV.com to join Ustadh Nouman and other students on this transformational journey every evening from 7 to 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time. You can also catch up with the replays afterwards.
This fear of people that we have, social anxiety, you can call it social anxiety. What is this fear actually? So now we're talking about taqwa, right? Taqwa of Allah. If it's not taqwa of Allah, what is it taqwa of? Taqwa means to protect yourself from something. What is someone protecting themselves from when they don't use straightforward speech? Because straightforward speech is an act of bravery where the only one you fear is Allah, right? But if you fear Allah, but you're also fearing some other people or things. What are those some other people or things? It could be fear of rejection. I need to say what is true. I need to say what is within Allah's deen. I'm not violating the taqwa of Allah. I'm saying the right thing. But if I say it, I'll be rejected. I'll be criticized. There will be a disapproval of me. There will be allegations made against me. There will be a questioning of my intentions being corrupt. There will be maybe a possibility that I'll be made an outcast. I'll no longer belong. Right? The people I love, they love me in this version of me. But if I speak my truth within the taqwa of Allah, then I might not be acceptable to them anymore. I'll just be an outcast. So now I fear losing the people around me. And so it's better for me to not speak straightforward, live in my head and not actually come out and say something. The fear of feeling shame, guilt, inadequacy. If I speak and they say nobody else thinks like this, why do you think like this? Something's wrong with you. The fear of being perceived. By the way, as I'm saying this, can you just, in your mind, you should be thinking about what the Prophet and his family went through, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in this surah. Right? The emotional, the psychological attacks on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Allah is opening up the door for him, for the marriage to Zainab and for their marriages, and the kinds of comments, right? And then Allah said, I did all of this, لِكَيْ لَا يَكُونَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ حَرَجٍ. So there may not be any shame on believers. I did all of this to free believers from this, right? Now, so the fear of feeling shame, guilt, inadequacy, the fear of being perceived as not submissive, because some people, in some cultures, Muslim cultures especially, but other cultures too, you're a good person if you're submissive. You're a good person if you obey. So if I speak something that contradicts and even if it's right, I'll be labeled as someone unsubmissive, ungrateful, deviant, therefore unworthy of protection. Because submissive people usually become very timid and they feel like they need the protection of the people around them. So they'll never question them because they might lose that protection. Right? So there's a kind of almost a hijack type situation. I might be labeled as selfish. By the way, that's part of the surah. Because something is halal. When something is halal, it's a benefit for you. When you come out and say, this is halal, there's nothing wrong with it, then people will say, how selfish are you? Right? Because this is an act of selfishness. Like the hypocrites were trying to accuse the Prophet ﷺ, everybody else gets 4 wives. Why does he get more? That's so selfish. You see that? And Allah said, there's no shame on the Prophet. مَا كَانَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. There's no shame on the Prophet. فِيمَا فَرَضَ اللَّهُ لَهُ. Whatever Allah mandates for him, whatever Allah allows for him. Sunnat Allahi fil ladhina khalaw min qabl. There's a sunnah of Allah. And by the way, I didn't tell you this. I was holding back some of the juicy stuff until later. The surah right after this one is Surah Saba. And in Surah Saba, there's a really beautiful story of a Israelite king, prophet, who brings another queen. So it's a very spiritual and romantic story actually. In between the lines, right? In this ayah, Allah said, whatever is allowed for the Prophet is allowed. There's no shame on him. This is a legacy of Allah from age old. Sunnat Allah fil ladhina khalaw min qabl. And in the very next surah, what's happening? Thousands of years ago, a king is pulling out a queen from her throne. Here's the sunnah of Allah right there. Right? This has happened before when Allah opens that door for His prophets. There's no shame in it. So you'll be labeled as selfish. Then there's legitimate fear. If I speak this and nobody wants to accept it, then there will be a fear of not being able to control outcomes because people feel safer around the familiar. And if you speak truthfully, if you say al-qawl as-sadid, there will be an earthquake. People will be rattled. People will see you differently, and the situation around you will change, and you're not able to control those outcomes, right? So you lose the familiar, and you're not sure how you're going to be able to handle the unfamiliar. Now, where do these fears come? I've listed a bunch of fears. Where do these fears come from? Sometimes they come from an upbringing, so there's a psychological component to them. So people are raised sometimes in societies and cultures where disagreement is punishable. Disagreement is disrespectful. You can't speak your mind because that's not how that's not what a good daughter does, that's not what a good son does. You can never speak your mind. There are cultures that emphasize harmony and the appearance of harmony and submission over commitment to the truth. There are cultures that are so extreme that even if, for example, unfortunately this happens, children get abused in families, and most abuse happens at the hands of relatives. So you find out, ma'adallah, that somebody got abused, some child got abused by their uncle at some Eid gathering or something. Something happened at some wedding. The family finds out about it. What happens next? Any police being called? Anybody beating up the uncle? Anybody taking him to trial? What's the policy? We don't talk about that. They'll even go as far as, you must have asked for it. You must have invited. How sick? Why? Because the submission policy is so powerful, we need to preserve our own version of dignity, even if that's violating a child's soul. We have to preserve that, right? So there's this can be a very extreme part of many cultures, right? And Muslims are not immune from this. There's also religious manipulation where in our religion and other religions, but we're talking about our own religion, patience and humility are very powerful values, but patience and humility are misrepresented as silence and submission and passiveness. So if you speak the truth, you're not patient, and if you speak the truth, you're not humble. And if you want to be patient and humble, silence. Right? So we manipulate these beautiful teachings and we crush al-qawl as-sadid using them. Right? And that's the opposite of the taqwa of Allah. Then there are other family dynamics, not just that push submission, but there are other family dynamics in which your opinion isn't really worth anything. That's because you're not a scholar, or you're not an elder, or you don't have a degree, or you're the youngest one, or this, or that, or the other. There's some reason to invalidate you. So anybody else that speaks, their opinion matters. You speak, your opinion is worthless. And you, even if you're speaking the truth, it's worthless. Like, Ibrahim alayhi salam is a kid. And he's speaking out against the idols, and people are like, are you joking? Am anta min al-la'ibin? Are you kidding? You can't be serious. This is just a kid, like a dismissal. And there are actually family dynamics in which people are raised to think that their opinion is entirely unworthy. So they choose to not speak the truth because they say, who's going to listen anyway? Well, why even speak up? There's no point. Because so they ascribe worthlessness to themselves, even though it was falsely ascribed by others. Then they internalize that and start ascribing it to themselves, right? The abandonment of the abandonment of past experiences. Like if, for example, somebody spoke the truth and trouble came their way because they spoke the truth. So they're like, I learned my lesson. Next time I'll learn to shut up. Next time, if I don't want trouble, I'll just stay quiet. There's a wife who a husband said, what's wrong? And she says, well, you disrespected my mother really badly. And he loses his mind and threatens and says, I'll take the kids. I'll move to another country. I'll do this to you or that to you. And your father's dead. Who are you going to call? Et cetera. He does all this stuff. What does she learn to do next time there's a problem? She can be quiet because it's terrifying. It's terrifying. By the way, men go through that too. Men are hostages. Stay quiet. There's a storm in your head. Won't say a word. You're terrified of the consequences. Right? Ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida is actually pretty revolutionary. Lose the fear of people and speak up. What? What are you talking about? That's taqwa. That's taqwa. That's some serious taqwa. Because the fear of people and the fear of judgment and the fear of abandonment and the fear of past, damage repeating itself. Oof. That's not a small fear. These are very real anxieties that people suffer. Right? And Allah in this surah, He liberated the Prophet ﷺ from that, even in the most subtle way. And through that, He called on the believers to be the people who are liberated from that. There may be someone among the Bani Israel that's very knowledgeable. Very knowledgeable. And he sees the Prophet ﷺ and immediately knows he's the Prophet. Immediately. He could just say al-qawl sadid and say, I know he's the Prophet. I'm switching sides. And maybe he's the one who gives the khutbah on after Sabbath. He's their imam. He's their sheikh. His next khutbah in Medina could be about how the Prophet himself is the messenger of Allah. Right before he goes and gives that speech, what are the consequences of that? If he gives that speech, what are the consequences? He might get killed. He'll definitely lose his position. There's a lot of people that wanted to be head imam, head rabbi. They've been vying for his position. He's going to be out in no time. Right? Then if he does accept Islam, when he comes to the Prophet ﷺ, is he some head scholar or is he a new beginner Muslim? He's a beginner Muslim. All this, everybody used to come and show their respects to him. Everybody used to ask him for the fatwa. Everybody used to ask him for tafsir. Everybody used to ask him about Musa alayhi salam and Ibrahim alayhi salam and Nuh alayhi salam. He was the go-to. All of a sudden he accepts the Prophet ﷺ. What's his status? He goes from being a lifelong teacher to now a beginner student, doesn't he? Is that an easy transition? The fear of losing your place? The fear of losing your position in society? The fear of losing your status? Losing your respect? The fear of no longer being the one to be heard, but the one who has to listen? The fear of that downgrade? Is that also a fear? Is the ego also afraid of a hit? Could it be enough to keep someone from accepting the truth? And by the way, I'm not just digging on rabbis or religious leaders in Medina. Could it be today that there's a Muslim, a scholar, a knowledgeable person who learned something about their deen, but they can't say it because if they do, they'll lose their following? Isn't it the same problem? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. By the way, this applies in all spheres of life. This is the foundations of Muslim civilization, right? I keep saying that. Imagine you're a pharmacist and you see your pharmaceutical companies doing something corrupt. You speak up, you're going to lose your job. They're going to have a team of 100 lawyers coming after you. You're going to be ostracized, never going to be able to find a job again, etc., etc. But if you don't speak up, 1 million people are going to have diseases they don't need to have. What ayah do you need to remember? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. You're working in a campaign. You're working in a political campaign and you know about deep corruption. You know about it. You're working in a charity organization and you know about how they're taking those charity funds that they take and they show you pictures of dying children and they take that money and now they're using it for other corrupt means. Throwing big banquet dinners for themselves. And you know about it. It's a good job. Pays the bills. You say something, you stay quiet. Ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. Whenever you say this, whenever you live by this, there's no way, no sane person will live by this and not know that there are going to be consequences. There have to be. So Allah says, يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ. I think this is one of the most profound statements on this subject.